Wow, a nice turnout, and glad to see all you guys here. We got a lot of bases to be covering. Of course, we have our keynote speaker coming up very shortly. I have a few people here with some campaigns, and just want to say a few words briefly. As you know, or should know, there are primaries coming up in May. Primaries are very important, and then the problem is that they're not ever played up. In fact, the parties, both parties, like it that way. They like it to be nice and quiet. Because in a primary, you have way more power than you have in a general election. Dramatically more power. You get to pick who the candidate is. And we've used that to knock out candidates that there's no way we could have knocked them out in a general election. We took them out in a primary. They know they're vulnerable. And it's a very powerful time, and if you can become a delegate, and there's still time, like in Fairfax, to become a delegate for the convention, you can be part of the solution to the problems that we're seeing now with a government that's not behaving properly. So we have a few people here I was going to let speak briefly. Let's see. One is a candidate. Let me let Dave LaRock want to come up and say a few words. Dave's running for House of Delegates.
Thanks for the warm welcome. It's good to see some familiar faces up front here, especially. I'm here because I value constitutional rights in general, and I certainly think that I have something in common with you folks. I feel that Second Amendment rights are very important. I won't make a long speech. I have announced my candidacy to run against Delegate Joe May, and that's for the 33rd House of Delegates seat for Virginia. And there really is a pretty distinct difference between Joe and myself. If you send me there, I will vote to prevent any restrictions to block, wouldn't agree with any additional restrictions of Second Amendment rights. Just plain and simple, you have my word on that. If anything, I think gun rights need to be expanded. And you could count on me if there's good legislation. I'd like you to educate me, and I would support that. I've laid out a couple sheets over here on the table that show what Delegate May's his record has been over the years. He's been there 20 years. He's pretty much established himself as not being a friend of Second Amendment rights. He has a C- rating from the NRA in 2008 and 2005. NRA is 58%. Citizens Defense, Virginia Citizens Defense League in 2004 is 75%. 2001, he was all the way down to 17%. So I just want to make it really clear, simple message. I would not do anything, I would not vote, I would not take any action to limit the rights to carry firearms. I think that the Constitution, I think you'll all agree, I'm not carrying tonight, but I do carry this. And that's where the protection is. If we vote right at the state level, vote right at the federal level, then your rights, our rights, will be protected. I own guns, I use guns, I hunt. I feel that I'm one of you guys, and be glad to introduce myself, talk to you a little bit more about what the campaign's about if you're interested. I'll be here for the speaker and then afterwards, and thanks very much for giving me the time to chat.
Are you a member
of your organization? I would like to become a member.
Okay, next person is Daniel Ellison. He's going to be representing the Cuccinelli campaign, Cuccinelli for Governor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ben Ellison. Sorry, I don't know if you heard. I do represent, as a volunteer, the Ken Cuccinelli campaign. He also opposes the bill that was just passed for the transportation bill. It's going to raise our taxes. Yeah. We all think it's a monstrosity. We are in need of volunteers as well as delegates. Fairfax County, the deadline is 1 week from this Saturday, and we need phone call volunteers as much as you can to help. Make phone calls, get the word out. Whatever you can do to help would be greatly appreciated. We're also at the gun shows pretty much everywhere. If you have any questions or if you're interested in helping, please come see me. In the meantime, thank you for your time. Have a good evening, and God bless each and one of you. And yes, I am a member.
Hey, Philip, ask him if he wants to renew.
I just got my membership.
Okay, another candidate on his way will be here in a few minutes, Rob Bell. But somebody from the campaign is here, and I've asked Buddy Buckner, who's with that campaign, to speak about the whole concept of being a delegate to the convention. So I'll let him talk about that.
Good evening. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. It's nice to see a lot of like-minded individuals together fighting back against the intrusion of the federal government, so I appreciate that. As Philip mentioned, Rob's en route, so I won't speak for him, but I'll give you a brief overview of what the party decided to do this year. The convention will be held on May 18th down in Richmond, and what that means is that if you are a registered Republican in your respective county, you would need to file to be a delegate. There's no cost to you. Anybody that's a registered voter is eligible to attend. All you need to do is fill out a filing form. There's different forms for different counties, and there's also different deadlines. Unfortunately, Prince William County's deadline already passed. Fairfax is next Saturday. The forms need to be into the county party by noon next Saturday the 9th. I have forms on me. If you want to fill them out, give them to me. If you want to fill them out later and call me or somebody on our campaign, we're more than willing to come pick them up from you. But it's critical that we get as many people down there as we can, because since it's not an open primary, the only way you're going to be able to voice your opinion and determine who you want to be your candidate is to attend the convention on May 18th. And it's sort of a fun experience. You'll go through a series of ballots, and whoever ends up getting 50% plus one will be the candidate. Yes?
I just have a question. Fairfax County is requiring a loyalty oath on its filing form. Are all the counties requiring a loyalty oath? Which I won't sign, by the way.
There is a loyalty oath component. That is up to the county. I can't speak for every county because I haven't looked at every filing form. We can't influence how they write their forms or what they need.
That's why I sent it back blank with the note that I won't sign it.
Yes.
Just because I did grow up in the 50s and 60s, and when people say, I want you to sign a loyalty oath, it scares the crap out of me, excuse me. Is this just saying that I'm going to be loyal to the Republican Party, or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's essentially saying that you will vote Republican, and I understand.
No, it doesn't. It says you intend, and your
Intent.
intentions can change between the time you sign it and later.
It's-
What
So,
I refuse to
just
sign
it,
does
don't
not
do
say
it
I will
on-
vote Republican. It says I will stand up in a meeting and either verbally or in writing promise to support all the Republican candidates chosen by them, and that's why I won't sign.
I understand there's been a little bit of disagreement over that within different counties, and if you do have reservations with that, I would encourage you to discuss it with your county party, to bring it up to them, and if it's something that's prohibiting you from signing it, I completely understand. And again, basically what we're doing is encouraging people to be as active as possible in the process, and I think everybody in this room sees how important it is that we affirm our constitutional rights, and the convention and attending and being a delegate is an integral way to do that. So,
Bruce?
I will say some of the forms also ask for a donation. You do not have to provide funding. That's a donation at the bottom. You can send it in with $0.
absolutely, all the fees are completely voluntary. So if you don't feel like supporting, if you don't feel like paying, that's fine. That's no problem whatsoever. Again, I just encourage you to get your form in before the filing deadline. Yes.
You know, in some instances, Alexandria City is not considered part of Fairfax County. For this purpose, is it?
No.
So
Alexandria City has a different filing form from Fairfax County. Prince William County has different. Manassas and Manassas Park have different. It's a bit confusing, and there's a series of deadlines. But again, if you have any questions, if you need anything, you can contact us, and we'll be more than happy to accommodate you in whatever fashion is needed. So.
You say you have the forms here?
I have Fairfax forms on me, Any other form, if you give me your email address, I can send them to you. And I'm going to be lingering around. I'll be here. I'm going to stay till after the meeting. So, yes.
It says, if requested, will express an open meeting, either orally or in writing as may be required, my intent to support all the nominees for public office in the ensuing election. So at the moment you make that statement of your intent, if some material fact should happen between then and the election, you can change your intent. It means nothing.
Well, none of the candidates have been chosen yet, so you can already, it's already moved.
And here's the resident expert.
The next person to speak is Delegate Rob Bell. So I'll let him step up to the mic here.
It is nice to be here. We've had a rough go in Richmond, I think, as most of you know. My name is Rob Bell. I'm a member of the General Assembly, and I have Thomas Jefferson's seat, which, if you're being historic, Mr. Jefferson was in the General Assembly when he was 25. He went back after writing the Declaration of Independence, and if you go through the list of people that have ever had that seat, I'm one of them. So it's a tremendous honor. What I'd like to do is talk for just a minute. I'm happy to take questions, but just talk for a couple minutes about the Constitution, and then really focus, obviously, on the reason most of you all are here. So, brought it with me. All right, this is it. This is our little book. Obviously, if you can see it in the back, this is our Constitution. Take 20 minutes to read it. Piece of cake, very simple. It is still the best protection we have against the federal government overreaching and to protect our individual rights. And the problem is that Barack Obama does not respect the limitations that this imposes. Amen. This is not, okay. This is not supposed to be a list of things he can do to us. This is a list of things he can't. And there's two parts of this. There's a list of enumerated powers. That's the list of things he can do, regulate interstate commerce. And then a list of a Bill of Rights that he specifically cannot. And I think that if you're in this room, you probably don't need this, but he is not abiding by either. He's not abiding by either. And I'm running for Attorney General. Am I allowed to politic? I don't want to overstep my...
Well...
Let me just say what the Attorney General ought to do. All right. Let me do this.
We're not endorsing anything.
That's right. This is what a good Attorney General should do. Let's just say it that way. All right. A good Attorney General should fight for this thing. Should wake up every day. Should wake up every day, pull out the newspaper, spread them across the table, get his staff together and say, what did he do last night? Was it constitutional? And if not, what are we going to do to fight it? That's what you need to do. Let me give you two examples of things we've done. They're not directly related to guns, and we'll get to guns. All right, number one. We had this issue about property rights. It was on your ballot last year. You may not know the story, but the story of that. In 2005, the Supreme Court said that the government can take property from one person with eminent domain and give it to another. Not for a school, not for a road, not for a police station, but just because they want somebody else to own it. If you think this is not happening in Virginia, you're wrong. There's a guy in Norfolk who makes radios. Norfolk is taking his factory and giving it to a movie theater. Yes. And they're using eminent domain to do it. He says, I don't want to sell. Oh, please, don't clap that. All right, so this happened in 2005. In 2007, we got together. We said, this has got to get back to the Constitution. We failed. We tried again in 2009, failed. We tried again in 2010. We failed a third time. It was our fourth try. I had a resolution in the House. Somebody else had the resolution in the Senate. We got a big group together, and we got it to you by one vote. One little vote in committee is what got that out to the public. You all voted for it 3-1. Thank you. Thank you. That's fine. I've got a special needs boy.
Did the guy get to keep his radio?
No. Okay. They are still in litigation because it's under the old rules. The only way this amendment will help is if they messed up, they won't be able to fix it. So there is some value to it, but no, Bob Wilson is fighting right now for his property. No, it's an awful case. He said, I don't want to sell. Norfolk said, you ought to. He said, no, I really don't want to sell. It's the right distance from the Navy shipyard. They said, we're going to take it. We're going to take it. And they're using, you don't care, they're using eminent domain to take it. It's just awful. And anyway. All right, the second thing was with Obamacare itself. Now, the details of Obamacare involve healthcare exchanges, and they involve healthcare. And the big deal is Obamacare says you got to buy something. That's what it is. Strip away all the details. You got to buy something. I went to UVA Law School. You don't have to. I defy you defy you to look through here and find their authority to make you buy something. And so that when the federal government said, yes, we can, in Virginia we said, no, you can't. We passed a statute that said we're not going to have Obamacare in Virginia. That's what set up the lawsuit. As you know, Ken Cuccinelli filed suit right away, went up to the Supreme Court. It was another case that was decided, but we lost by 1 vote, 5-4. And so I'm sorry to say that we missed it, but we were 1 vote away from overturning the whole thing. So I think that's what you have to do when it comes to fighting for the Constitution is, again, look for every argument you can make to win. Now, let's talk about guns. Just to put my background on the table. So I'm a gun owner. I'm a member of the Rivanna Rifle and Pistol Club. It's a gun club in Albemarle County. Member of the NRA. I've got a concealed carry permit. I believe you have a fundamental right to defend yourself, period. Now, here's the thing. I don't even like to say it that way, because I think the people who oppose gun rights like to separate us into little categories. And they will say, we've got the collectors over here, we'll let them get special guns for collections. And then you've got the self-defense folks, we'll let them have certain kind of guns with certain kind of permits. And then you've got the hunters, and they can have long arms, but they don't need pistols, and they don't need. We shouldn't break up into subcategories. You have a fundamental right. It's right here in the Constitution. It's clear as day. They should not be able to restrict your right to have guns. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would be happy. Oh, let me finish with just everybody here. You don't need this lecture, but the Second Amendment is crucial, not just for itself, but because it undergirds all the rest. What protects us in the Constitution and our rights is the Second Amendment. So thank you for coming out tonight, and I'd be happy to just take questions with that. $25.
Hey, you're going to be Attorney General, that's not that much.
So I'd be happy to take questions. I can talk about some of the bills we've had in the last. Yes, sir.
Right now they're proposing to federally regulate private sales,
Yep.
which is, gun control has always been regulated by the feds based on interstate commerce.
Right.
If you were Attorney General of Virginia, would you stand up and say the feds have no right to
Yeah.
regulate sales within Virginia?
Phil was there. We had the so-called gun show loophole came up in the Crime Commission, and we defeated it by 1 vote, and I was the 1 vote. Now there's 8 other people that were the 1 vote, so I don't want to take more credit than I deserve. But we defeated on that very basis, which would be that it is just a knife edge for private transfers. I mean, the next will be the swap meets, the next will be you and your brother. Bit by bit, it's just the most obvious, but the rest will follow. The problem, of course, is the feds will pass whatever they pass, and then we will fight as hard as we can.
Some states are passing laws saying they will arrest any agent.
Yeah, we'll see.
Who will try to enforce it.
Let me tell you, we had a law that I supported, voted for, and I think it was killed in the Senate, Mark Cole's bill, that said, so everybody understands the issue. So the Constitution says the states, the federal government can regulate interstate commerce, and that's to make sure that we don't set up a tariff on goods from Maryland. It's to allow a nation basically to trade. Okay. It was never intended to be for every single thing that a state does. It was supposed to be for interstate commerce. Bit by bit, the courts have expanded interstate commerce, and there's a famous court case called Wickard v. Filburn. Is this too detailed for everybody? I don't want to. Okay, all right. Wickard v. Filburn is a famous case, and it's the furthest expansion the federal government ever got. It was at the height of the New Deal, and here's what it said. There was a farmer, and I'm going to get some of the details wrong because it's been a while since I've read it. A farmer was growing wheat on his own property, and he was feeding it to his own pigs. So this, not only was it not interstate, it wasn't even commerce. He just literally was growing his own wheat, feeding it to his own pigs. They had an agricultural bill that said how much wheat you can grow. And they came down and tried to regulate him, and he said, "You are out of your mind. Interstate commerce, it's nothing, I'm just feeding my own pigs." And the court ruled as follows. First off, they ruled wrong, but what they said was, well, if you hadn't grown that wheat, you'd have had to buy it. If you had had to buy it, it would have been in commerce. And even if you bought wheat from your neighbor, who is in Virginia, he would have had to buy the wheat from Minnesota. Therefore, ultimately, it was interstate commerce, and therefore, it's okay. That's the case law. Now, well, okay, but it's not. There were 2 great expansions of federal power until 2012. when I was in law school, we studied the two great expansions of federal power. The first was after the Civil War, done by amendments, the way it's supposed to be. So if you want to change this, there's a whole process. You can do it through the states or do it through Congress. And there's two different ways to do it. After the Civil War, they did it that way. The second way was the way Roosevelt did it, which is he just beat on those judges until they retired. And that's what ultimately happened. They struck down dozens upon dozens of laws saying that there were violations of the Constitution. He kept trying, and one by one, they retired until he got his majority. 100 years from now, they're going to study federalism and the third great expansion. They'll still study the Civil War. They'll still study 1938. And then they're going to study 2012. So 2012 will be the year that the Supreme Court upheld the idea that they can make you buy something. So the long answer to your question, any opportunity I have, we will fight. If this court would sustain Obamacare, I'm not terribly optimistic that they're going to help us. Now, the good example about Obamacare is they have ruled for the main case. There are still ways to pick at it, and so we're picking at it on the religious liberties basis. You probably heard this. There's some cases that would say, okay, the main case was successful. What about making us buy abortions, birth control, things like that? I would make the same argument for this. We're not simply relying on interstate commerce. We also have the Second Amendment. After Heller, there's some basis to say that even if you say it's interstate commerce under the Wickard v. Filburn decision, there's a special carve-out. There's a Bill of Rights. Even if it's true for everything else, guns are different. They're different because there is no Second Amendment for broccoli. There's no special thing, but there is something for this.
Let me ask the last question because we're running out of time.
Sure, and I'm not leaving. I'll just stick around.
Yeah, you're free. You know, we're also, by the way, we're going to, those that want to, we're going to go to the diner down the road, the Jukebox Diner afterwards for those that want to. And Bruce wanted to get a head count. If you're planning on going to that, if you raise your hand.
Hungry.
Thank you.
And my question to you would be, which is kind of hitting a little bit on what Paul Moak was heading towards, and that's what about this bill that Marshall put forward? Bob Marshall put a bill forward that said the state will not allow any employee of the state or local government to do anything to assist the federal government.
That's a better, that we have more chance of success with that. So there was a bill last year with the NDAA, and this would be a bill sort of in the same idea. It is, the case law is limited on what you can do to just not comply, to simply say, we simply refuse. We're simply not going to do it. That case law is not very favorable. There is more optimism for you saying, look, there are things you can do and things you can't do, but we will not help you. We will not help you in any way. We will not support this. We will not let you use state agencies, state officers, state officials to carry out something we think is unconstitutional. That's a more promising avenue. And so if you could get a law like that in place, then obviously the Attorney General could defend that law. Everybody understands the Attorney General doesn't write the laws. You are ultimately the lawyer for the state and the state's laws. And so as good laws go into place, you can defend them, but you don't get to write them from scratch.
Right, and you can't go to for example, you and I cannot write, if he becomes Attorney General, we can't write Delegate Bell a letter saying, can you give us an opinion on this? They don't do that. They can't do that for individuals. What you do is you go to your delegate or your senator, and they could then request the opinion. But he's not our attorney per se, but the government's attorney.
As the state's, the
the
Commonwealth.
state government.
But it's easy to get somebody. There's 100 delegates. Somebody will always ask for an opinion.
It's certainly possible. Last question.
Yes, sir.
Did Governor McDonald just cave in on these exchanges, even though the Supreme Court said you didn't have to participate?
All right, this is.
So why would we believe that guys like him are going to fight and not cooperate when they cave all the time?
Yeah, let's
No,
I just.
Can you repeat the
question? Yeah. This is not directly related to guns except in sort of the trust aspect. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we had a session which was pretty good. You could say some good things, some bad. Is that fair? Okay. Pretty good until the last 2 days. And in the last 2 days, two big things happened that if you're conservative, and if you're not a conservative, I don't need to preach, but I'm conservative, I suspect most people in this room are, that went the wrong way. The first was the transportation plan. That is according to how you score it, I'll just call the second biggest tax increase in Virginia history. Very disappointed. I didn't like it. Voted against it the first time, voted against it the last time, and it passed. So that was the first thing. The second thing is this issue of exchanges, and there are two aspects that are dangerous. So Obamacare wants to set up exchanges, and this is where people buy insurance. That you've heard exchanges, that's what it is. The government gives us a chance to either have Virginia run them or to have the federal government run them. And we decided we don't want to run them. We're not going to help you. I don't think these are going to work. Why should we use all of our employees and smarts to help make this thing work that we don't want to work? That was the idea. Okay. 2 weeks later, we saw the first bill, and it came through my committee. And what happened was the bill said we should regulate them. We should make sure that if anything goes wrong, we have a state official you can call. We should manage them. We should take care of them. And there was a guy leaned over to me and he said, hey, because he knows I'm running for Attorney General, he said, hey, Bell, your Tea Party people won't like this. You better vote no. And he was kidding me, because I mean, surely we were not about to do what we had just said we were not going to do. Well, we read it. That is exactly what it does. It starts Virginia down the road toward taking over these exchanges. And it cracked the door a little bit. We thought we had that bill killed. In fact, we thought we had the vote so much that the guy whose bill it was came over and said, just kill it, don't embarrass me in front of everybody. We're like, we're not trying to embarrass anybody, we just want to kill the bill. Came back a week later, rolled on through. That was the first bill. The second one, has anybody ever heard of something called navigators? You will. Navigators are what's in the Obamacare bill to help you navigate the Obamacare bill. Obamacare is so, pardon me, but freaking complicated that you need navigators to make it work. Okay, same thing. Navigators now are coming to Virginia. The question was, should Virginia help regulate and manage the navigators? Second bill that came on, we said no. We said no. We said we don't want to participate in Obamacare. This is not what we want to do. Same thing. Looked like it was in trouble. It also passed. The third thing is bigger yet, which is whether we're going to take the Medicaid money. They're offering us $9 billion in Medicaid money. It'll start to run out in 2017. Virginia will have to start paying for it. It's a big poison apple. Please take this money, then you'll make changes, and you'll get stuck paying the tab. So to answer your question is the first two passed. The door is now open a crack. I fear next year we'll open it a little further before you know it. We will be running Obamacare in Virginia. I hope I'm wrong, but that seems the way it's headed.
What we all do when Obama sends navigators to take our guns.
Well, hopefully that will be.
Regulate them?
Say again?
Regulate them?
Yeah, well, the real thing would be this Medicaid issue. The reason we had this huge pressure for tax increase is because all this money is going to Medicaid. Medicaid is taking up 25% of the budget. We are now looking at expanding Medicaid, and I hope that we don't. And if you are fiscally conservative, not just a Second Amendment person, just be aware that this is an issue that's out there. And I wish I had better news. But your question was, how can you trust? I mean, I just look at our records and try to figure out what you think we'll do.
Sure.
And thank you.
All right.
I'll be going to the diner with you later. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, let me say that as a child growing up, one of the things I remember in the 50s and 60s on television was that you watch movies and you watch television and you realize that, boy, if anything ever happened down the road, if something went wrong with the government, I learned of some horrible conspiracy or somebody in the government was murdering somebody or whatever, you were left with the impression that the one thing you could do in the case of some kind of internal conspiracy or any kind of a serious problem was you could go to the press. And back in the 50s, they were the ones that were going to blow the lid off of this. My God, if you got it to the press, whatever was going on wrong in the government was fixed. A lot of movies ended with that, where the person finally got to the right person in the press after going through hell, and then it was taken care of. Well, what's happened over the last 30 years or so is that relationship has gone away. The intent was that the press would be a watchdog for us. They would be out there asking the tough questions, waiting and watching the government. And if the government did something wrong, they would blow the lid off of it, Watergate, whatever. That was their key role. They were to inform us. They were to be out there looking impartially at things and watching. What's happened over time is so much of the press has become nothing more than a branch of the government. They're nothing more than another mouthpiece of propaganda coming out of the government. So, and that's been very disappointing and very scary because they're supposed to be a watchdog. What happens when your watchdog turns on you? Then what? But what's happened in interesting in the case of the Washington Times was, and some of the other media outlets, there are some cases out there where they really are doing their job. You know, I see a lot of stuff. I mean, you know, Fox News is not perfect, but they've done a heck of a lot better job than MSNBC and all these other organizations. Again, not perfect, but more closely to what I'd be looking at. And I think what was interesting was that the reaction, when I went down to the Gun Rights Policy Conference, our speaker was down there, and she was invited to speak, Emily Miller from the Washington Times, and I think she was a little surprised, maybe I'm wrong, I may have read her wrong, but I think she was a little surprised at how much she was viewed as a celebrity on her own right by people that don't even live in Virginia or Washington, you know, out from all these other states and everything. And in thinking about it, I think one of the things that she's simply done, ironically, is she's done her job, and she's done it damned well. She's gotten in there and looked at Washington, D.C., and started with a very simple premise, but unblinkingly followed that premise to where it was supposed to lead her to eventually owning a gun, following all the rules that Washington, D.C. set forth. And in doing so, it was unblinking. She went in there and she did what a reporter should do. She reported, she dug, she investigated. She checked her facts out. She wasn't a mouthpiece for Washington, D.C. She was there looking out for the people. You know, what is going on up there? What does it take for a citizen to be able to exercise a right? So in that sense, she reminded me of the person I would have gone to as a child had I discovered something terrible going on, some horrible conspiracy that I feel like she would have taken it and done something with it. And of course, the paper gets a lot of credit because she had to get permission. She's an employee like any other. Can I do this? And their answer was yes. And they let her do, when one thing led to another, led to another. But it was the tremendous, not only the writing itself, but the investigative part. Basically, she was one of those little bulldogs that's latched onto somebody's pants and will not let go. No matter how hard you kick, that bulldog's not letting off. And that earned a lot of respect for people, from people around the country. We're looking for people to do that, to be a hero, to stand up and fight the battle. So with that little introduction, I'd like to introduce Emily Miller.
Just a reporter. That's so nice of you to do. Please, I know people outside. I feel terrible. Do you want to stand over here and take my seat? All of you, can you even hear? I just feel bad standing up there. Thank you all so much, and I'm so honored to talk to you. Your reputation precedes you, and I watch everything you do out here in Virginia. Phil, as we met, as he said, the Second Amendment Foundation in Florida, and got to hear more about your activities. And luckily, you live in a state that makes things a little bit easier. And you are so active in keeping your constitutional rights respected here and not infringed in Virginia. And thank you to Ed Levine for organizing me all the time, as I've been very disorganized. And I do apologize. I was supposed to be here. I think many of you know. A few months ago, my grandmother passed away, so I had to cancel. So I apologize for any inconvenience that caused. She was 100, so it was yeah. I'm laughing because she's lived a very good life. So, but so I wanted to just start with giving you, for those of you who didn't follow the series I did at the Washington Times, sort of what I did and how this all started. And it didn't start with, I wish I could say it started with, I'm a journalist and I'm going to get them. It really started with being a victim of crime. And that's when I first decided I wanted to get a gun. I lived in Washington, D.C. It just quite frankly never occurred to me to have a gun. My dad always had a gun growing up. He actually had a concealed carry permit in Baltimore, which was very hard to get. But he also had a big secret from the girls, his daughters, and never told us about it. So it was not a pro-gun household. It was, dad has a gun, girls go play with Barbies, don't know about it. So it wasn't really anything that ever occurred to me. And I was house sitting for some friends. They had this really big house, and a dog, taking care of their dog. And on New Year's Day, I took the dog for a walk, and very stupidly, I now know, closed the door but didn't lock the front door, I knew it would only be gone for a few minutes. And as I came back and was coming back in, there was a man coming out, and he looked clearly on drugs, bloodshot, disheveled, obviously startled. I actually stopped and asked him, "What are you doing? Why are you in the house?" And instead of running, and he said, "I'm here to clean the pool." And it was New Year's Day. I mean, it was the middle of January 1st. So I said, we didn't call anyone to clean the pool. And he said, "Oh, it's the neighbors." And he ran down the street. And that would have stupid enough of me, that whole situation. But then I decided that I obviously watched way too many episodes of Law and Order. I was gonna get a picture and turn it into the police of the intruder. So I chased him down the street with my BlackBerry to take a picture. That was the really stupid part of the story. And I got to the end of the cul-de-sac and found about 15 men, 2 pickup trucks, just all standing there waiting. And clearly what they've been doing is going house to house. I called them, then I got really scared. I turned and ran back in the house, locked the door, called the police. What happened was, they realized after, is he had gotten in long enough. He'd gone through the house, my wallet in the kitchen, in my bag, and those guys were the lookout, and I startled them. And so we got out. I mean, by the grace of God, he didn't grab me, didn't hurt me. I don't know if he was armed. But that night, as I was going to sleep, and the police really looked the house, it was a big house, looked the house up to down to make sure they hadn't left a window open or something so they could come back in and get the good stuff. Obviously, my wallet was not the value in the house, this big house. And so I went to bed that night, and this dog obviously was not useful at all in protecting me. And I went to bed that night, I was just terrified, probably the scariest I've ever been. I just didn't want, what happens if these men come into this house, I'm alone. So I took a dresser and shoved it against the door of the bedroom and barricaded myself in, and still really didn't sleep much. But that's when it occurred to me that if I just had a gun on the bedside table, if they came in, I could protect myself. I would have a chance to defend myself. So the next day, it was just really on my mind, and I put it on Twitter. As some of you may know, I'm really big on Twitter, @EmilyMiller. And I wrote, I think I'm going to get thinking about getting a gun in DC. And sweetie, I'm going to take a bunch of questions at the end, promise, okay? And if you're totally bored, come up here and sit up closer too. If I talk too long and get boring, you let me know. So Twittered, and they all said, everyone responded to me, "You can't get a gun in DC, it's impossible, there's no way." All the responses. Talk to the NRA, they'll tell you can't get a gun. And so then what I didn't know then, which I know now, is even after the Heller decision, which overturned the city's 30-year ban on handguns, what the city did, which you see also in Chicago, is they put up all these registration barriers that were virtually impossible so that nobody would get a gun. So they were technically abiding by the Supreme Court, but not letting anyone get it. So nobody was doing it. So that really pissed me off. So that's when I decided I was going to get a gun. A, because I wanted to defend myself, but B, because I wanted to stop the city from saying no to me and to the rest of the residents. And unlike Virginia, which you have a fairly safe state, DC is a crime mess. It's the only place, while violent crime has decreased in the rest of the country, it's up in DC every year. Assaults with a gun were up 20% last year. And if you're a woman, God forbid, rape and sexual assaults were up 50% in Washington, D.C. last year. And when I started reporting these statistics about 4 months ago, Kathy Lanier, the police chief, took down the entire website and has yet to put it back online, claimed that they were shifting sites. And the city council is looking into it. But that's how scared they are that people are going to find out that it is just a den of crime in this city. And one of the reasons I attest to this now is because the criminals are the only ones with guns. They know, because even though the Heller decision overturned the right to keep arms in Washington, it did not decide whether you have the right to bear arms. So Washington, D.C. now is the only place in the country where you cannot take your gun out of your home. Illinois had that, but just recently the 7th Circuit overturned that decision, and so the state legislature has 6 months to rewrite laws to give them some carry rights. DC, my gun is basically a paperweight, which I can just hope that the guys come into my house again, or my apartment, and attack me this time. But that's why I believe crime is on increase, because they're not going to come here. If you're walking down the street with your iPhone, which is what all the criminals want these days, and they would see you down the street in Virginia, especially in this room. I mean, they're not going to have, as they say, a good day at the office in this room. No one's giving up their iPhones, or without like a little bit of a problem. In DC, they know they're the only one. They know we're sitting ducks. They know that we don't have guns. So it's easy for them to just take it. And they get in scuffles, and people get shot, and people get hurt because they're on drugs and whatever they take these days, and it's nothing for them. So anyway, back to the story is, so I decided I was going to get a gun. I really knew nothing, and part of the deal, as Philip said, I went to my editor and I said, I want to do this. I'm going to get a gun. I want to write about it. I think it'll become interesting. It'll probably take a couple weeks, a few stories. Final last words, right? And my editor, which I thought was really smart, said, all right, you can do it, but you can't read what any other reporter's ever written in doing this. Because the Washington Post had done what they called a series. It was one story, and it was so... I wasn't allowed to read it, but I have since, and he hated guns and gave it away at the end because it was so horrible to him to have a gun at home. But anyway, he didn't want me to have, my editor didn't want me to have any hints or any idea what was going on. The idea was for me to look at it, just basically, he's like, imagine yourself a single mother who lives in, say, the 7th District of Virginia and just, is facing a lot of crime every day and wants to get a weapon. What would you start? Where would you go? So that's what we did. So I quite literally went. I had never even been to the police department in DC, the headquarters. I went down there, and I found the office, the registry office, and I said, "Hi, I'm here to get a gun." And they were like, "What?" And because I really didn't know at the time, I thought in order to get a gun, it was like getting a driver's license before you can drive. So I thought that's how the system works. I didn't. Instead, I had to find, and they said, well, do you have a gun? And I said, no, I don't have a gun, I need to get a gun. And they said, well, you have to get a gun in order to register a gun. I said, okay, where do I go to get a gun? They go, well, you can't buy in Washington. And I was like, well, then where do I go? I'm like, well, you have to find out. And they said, what kind of gun do you want? And I said, I don't know. And the lady said, you could get a Glock. Every police officer tells you to get a Glock. And I'm going to make some enemies tonight, but I think Glocks are so ugly. And I don't... It's a controversial statement, and everybody, all the Glock owners are like, they function so well and everything. But as many of you know, I ended up getting a Sig Sauer of a P229. It looks really cool. I deliberately wanted the two-tone. I did not want the black. And now I have to also be truthful about it, that it doesn't even really fit my hand that well. It's too big. And because there's no shooting ranges in DC, so I really only went once. I went to Sharpshooters in Lorton and tested some. I didn't really give it enough time. I thought the gun looked super cool. I mean, if I go through this process again, which I will take my time and get a gun, but it fits fine. I've learned to just sort of twist my hand around to the side a little bit to make it work, and my aim is fine or anything, but so anyway, that's the truth about the SIG. And I went to the police department. They said you should probably go talk to Charles Sykes, and I didn't know who Charles Sykes was, but Charles Sykes is the one legal gun dealer in DC. The kicker, though, is he doesn't buy or sell, because it's just that they make too much of a hassle. And at some points, the summer before last, DC zoned him out. He'd been there for about 30 years, mostly transferring for justice transfers for police or security guards, things like that. But his business had not increased much since the Heller decision, quite frankly. So Charles Sykes works about 3 hours on appointment only. Well, they wanted to get rid of him so badly that they basically zoned him out. They said you can't be in an office that's within 100 yards of police station, library, school. Then they added apartment building, house, and office building. I could go on, but you open in the middle of Washington, D.C., imagine anything that's not within 100 yards. I mean, I guess it would be like the Lincoln Memorial. He'd have to have his office. I mean, I can't think of anything else, not even the Washington Memorial, maybe, in front of the White House. So then that went on for 2 months. So there was a 2-month period where no one in DC could get a gun whatsoever, a handgun. Finally, a threat of lawsuit. they gave him an office in the DMV. So in order to meet with your one legal dealer, you have to go through the DMV, which is what I did, and found Charles Sykes, who's a great man, and he's doing this as a service. He is not making money off it. And then as he helped me get started, try to figure it all out. What I realized quickly was that at that point, there were 17 steps I had to take to get a legal handgun in DC, to own it, to keep it in my home, 17. And I went through them all very methodically and wrote about them, which many of you read, and some of them were just so, ridiculous. You know, I had to take a written test, which you need to study for. I'm trying to remember, I had to get fingerprinted. I had to meet with Charles Sykes twice. They also, because DC has the, quote, high capacity magazine rule, Sykes won't accept your gun if it comes in standard capacity over 10, which a SIG does, I think 13. So I had to find a dealer. I couldn't just buy it on some place who just, sends the box from the manufacturer. I had to buy it from a dealer who could get one of those stupid magazines that I have in my guns that blocks off 3 rounds, because that's going to make all the difference in the crime in this city. Change it and stick it and send it to me, to Charles Sykes, before he would accept it. So, that took 2 weeks alone to figure that process out. There's a 10-day waiting period, but the most ridiculous and the most difficult part, and what really was the one time in the whole process where I actually went to my editor and I was like, I can't do it anymore. I've lost my patience for this, and I've lost my ability to do it, because they had this mandatory 5-hour training class, which now, interestingly enough, Governor Liberal O'Malley is trying to do in Maryland. This exact same, where they make you go to 4 hours in a classroom, which basically does nothing. They don't even teach you the safety rules. They teach you the laws of the city. And then an hour at the range, which basically is, can you pick up a gun and shoot a piece of paper? You don't even need to get it in center mass. You could do it much better than, anyone could. So, but the problem was the DC, the way this class was taught is they just said, there was a very vague idea of who could teach the class. So when I went back to the police department to get the list, because of course it wasn't online, because they want to make you go down there, everything they do deliberately to make it harder. I went down there and they gave me 2 pieces of paper with, I counted, 47 names on it, phone numbers, that's it. No email, no address, no website, nothing, no affiliation. All of them outside of DC, because they're illegal to teach the class in DC because of the hour at the shooting range. And so my editor said, why is it bothering you so much? Just pick a name and go take this stupid class. And I was like my editor's like 6'4". I said, you want me to just go to some random guy's house in Maryland or Virginia, I don't know his name, I don't know his company, I don't know what it is, and just show up and he's armed and I'm not? I'm like, this is crazy, I'm not doing this. And so I started calling through the list and getting a lot of wrong numbers, getting a lot of disconnected numbers, getting a lot of people saying, I don't know why I'm on this. So then I decided, let me find out who these people are. So it was the longest day. I called all 47 names. Found one guy, says, I only teach the class in Colorado. Which I was still so sure it's a front for like some bath salts dealing or something. So I said, why would you teach the class in Colorado for DC residents? He goes, it comes up. I'm like, I don't. So by the end I got down to 4, and all of them were men who taught in their home. And one of them actually said, I teach this class in my basement. And I don't know if you've seen that movie, Silence of the Lambs. It puts the notion on its body. I was like, this is crazy. And I actually called the police again. I said, who are these people? I said, I'm not going to some strange man's house who we know is armed. I've already told him I'm not armed. In his basement? And so that really, I think, as I continue to write about this course, the fact that it was so discriminatory against women, I think, is one of the reasons that the city council was forced to move on it. And as I started writing this whole series on all these 17 steps, the city council moved within 2 months to change a few things to try to make it a little bit more appealing. They say that they're going to take away the vision test. We did take a vision test and the ballistics test. My gun went through the ballistics test, so if I ever murder anyone, they've got the brass somewhere to do it, take care of that. But then I just kept talking about this class because this class was so onerous for me and I think dangerous. And then here's the thing: is the city didn't dictate what the cost was. So I mean, I'm all for free enterprise, but the charge is basically between $200 and $250 for this class. So you add that on to everything else. I finally found a woman who was not on the list because DC wouldn't update the list. They never updated the list. They wouldn't update the list. It was a woman, and she had a storefront. It was training, gun training. I felt so safe. It was completely reasonable. Again, though, $250. I mean, so this rule discriminates basically against anyone in DC because of the cost. Not to mention, anyone is a woman who doesn't want to get attacked in some man's face, but not that these men are. I just don't know who they are. So finally, by last March, the city council got the hint, and they moved to get rid of the class. And so now the class is gone. They've got a few more things that they've taken out. So it was effective in getting, I counted, we are now down to 11 steps to getting a gun in DC. It took me to get my gun. I started in October of last year. And I also want to say that's also the first time I ever shot a gun. So this is everything I'm talking about tonight is a year new to me. But I started last October, I shot a gun, started this process, and I got it a year ago this month, February. So it took me 4 months and cost $435 in fees, plus the gun. And so it's just prohibitively expensive, obviously, and that's their purpose in it. Now it's 11 steps, and it'll cost about $215 because, or $185. Charles Sykes charges $125, which those of you out here in the real world in America know is very expensive for a transfer. But I actually don't fault him this because, as I said, there are very few people going through the process, and even just to make ends meet a few hours a day, he's not making much in the course of a year. But I would love for a real gun dealer, a real gun shop to open in DC, but so far there's still not the demand because it is so difficult. And I know because people tell me all the time, law-abiding people, they just get their guns, they don't register them. It's not like these people aren't getting guns, and it's sure, obviously, the criminals aren't stopping to get guns. I mean, assault with weapons were up 20% last year. And I'm sure Kathy Lanier will say, oh, they're getting them all from Virginia. Well, they're getting them all because they can and they will, and they know we're not armed. And after the city council moved and made the registration process slightly easier, I'm still trying to pressure them to make these things, to get rid of a lot of these laws that are absolutely ridiculous. And so I started profiling veterans who had gone through DC and been treated horribly. These are either veterans of Iraq or Afghanistan. Many of you, I thought have read these stories, and I think they're so brave. A lot of them several of them are still active duty too. Augustine Kim, Lieutenant Augustine Kim, Sergeant Matthew Corrigan, and they, put themselves at risk by going public with me with their stories of how they got caught up in DC's gun laws. But by doing so, and I'll just say a couple of things that they got arrested for. For example, Augustine Kim, who was injured in Afghanistan, when he had been overseas, he had left his guns at his parents' home in New Jersey, and he lived in South Carolina. He was injured, he came back, and he was recovering at Walter Reed. When he was going back to South Carolina, he went to New Jersey to pick up his guns. He was driving through DC because he had a follow-up appointment at Walter Reed. He then got lost and did like a bad U-turn or something. The police pulled him over, and they said, do you have a firearm in the car? And he had them unloaded, locked, cased in the trunk, completely legal federal transport. And something I've learned along the way is, if ever asked if you have a firearm in the car, even if it's legal and even if it's unloaded in the trunk, you remain silent. You use that constitutional right. I think everyone here knows that, but I didn't know that, and and I definitely would have been the honest person who said, yes, it's legal, it's in the trunk. Well, the DC when I started writing this series, had this whole system. It was on papers on their website of how it was illegal to stop and get gas when you're legally transporting. It's illegal to get food. It was legal to stop in any way, which is not legal because federal law trumps state laws. But DC is using it against them. The police are using it against him. So poor Lieutenant Augustine Kim was thrown in jail for the night and was charged with misdemeanor of possession of unregistered firearms, 4 counts. In the end, he got probation, but has a criminal, it's on his record, and he's now active duty in Kosovo. And then another case I did, Sergeant Corrigan, he did not register his guns, which we can say, he did break the law in that sense, but they were unloaded, cased in his home, and it's a long story, and I suggest you read his story on Washington Times website someday, how this all came about. A veteran, he called the help hotline because he was having nightmares, flashbacks from Iraq. And the police did an illegal search, and the SWAT team showed up at his house, did an illegal search and seizure without a warrant, and found his unloaded, cased, unregistered guns, put him in jail for 2 weeks. He was eventually let off because he did not, this was their illegal search and seizure, and he's suing the city, which he actually has every right to do. When they put him in jail, they changed his name on the ticket, and that's how he got, quote, lost in jail. He's still active duty. And finally, Adam Meckler was, he was just retiring from the Army, Specialist Meckler, and he had to go to the VFW, which is in DC. And he had been very careful, he's a medic, he had been very careful to check the bag that he takes to the range to make sure he had not left a gun in it before he went. And he was going through security, and suddenly they shut down the building, sirens went off, handcuffed him. They wouldn't tell him why. In the end, he had several loose rounds in the bottom of the bag. No gun. They arrested him. They still didn't tell him what his charges were. And he said, I was in Iraq. He said to me, I was in Iraq. We didn't treat the Iraqis, prisoners of war, the way they treated me. I mean, he's like, they marched me down the hall like a criminal, and they wouldn't tell me what my charges were, threw him in jail. And he didn't have a good lawyer and couldn't afford to pursue it, so ended up not only having a criminal record, he's now on the criminal registry of firearm offenders in DC. Can't get off that. These things, at least these stories, and I admire these men so much for going public with their story, and there's just, there's more that I've been working on behind the scenes too, who don't want to go public. And actually, U.S. Senate got involved in some of these because, for example, Lieutenant Kim, they took when they put him in jail, they took his guns and for 2 years refused to give them back. And Senator Lindsey Graham read my story. He personally called Kathy Lanier, the police chief, and was like, "Get him his guns back tomorrow." And those guns were FedEx for Saturday delivery. So, when the Senate gets involved, the city does listen, and the city council moved that month to make it so that if you are arrested for an unregistered gun, the prosecutor has the option of making a civil disposition, so you would get a fine but not have a criminal record and not go to jail. The prosecutor opposes this, so who knows if they'll ever use it. But the city actually, which was really surprised me, city council voted unanimously to pass it about 3 days after the Newtown shooting, when it was such a dangerous time to do that. So that is law now, so there is a chance that you won't be thrown in jail and have a criminal record for being, a brave soldier getting caught up in DC. So, and this all, of course, compares to if you're a rich anchor at a network news station, David Gregory, who is, the anchor of Meet the Press and quite arrogant, called the police and said, I'm interviewing Wayne LaPierre, I want to wave a 30-round magazine at him, because he's obviously an unbiased person, reporter. And police said, no, you don't get special rights to disregard our 10-round limit magazine law, you can't do it. He did it anyway, on live TV, and the police spent 3 weeks investigating this. I called every single day, and I was like, how's the investigation going? What's new in the investigation? Have you looked at your TiVo or DVR? That's a good place to start this investigation, because he did it on national TV. And could never get one bit of answer. They turn it over to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor sends this long letter saying he's not pressing charges. So Adam Meckler, who's this soldier bravely protecting us overseas, has a few rounds of ammunition and nothing else. And he's got a criminal record, he's on the gun offenders list. And then you've got rich, famous David Gregory, who doesn't even get charged. So these laws are not even being prosecuted fairly, which is part of the unfairness of this whole system. And I'll tell you, I'm not done with this David Gregory story. I have I want to know what investigation they did. I don't think they did any, but I want to prove that. So since they're refusing to give over what's the public information, which is the case number in the investigation, I FOIA'd all of that, and they still refused to turn it over. So I went to the city council and I said, you have oversight over Lanier. She won't turn this over. They're following up on this. So now I've got a new FOIA request in for basically anything that exists in that department. So, I mean, I wanted to find out what they did. And I also am FOIAing. Not fair. And I'm FOIAing the Attorney General of DC, who is buddy-buddy with David Gregory, and I want to know what was in those documents that had him make this decision not to prosecute. You know, I don't need to see, quite frankly, I would like to see David Gregory spend the night in jail. I was looking forward to that. But at the very least, he should get probation, like Augustine Kim got for legally transporting his guns. So, you know, we'll just stay on that. And you know, I'm going to stay working on DC and keep pursuing all this because there should not be a registration requirement. It is absolutely unconstitutional. It doesn't reduce crime, like all gun control laws. Have been proven over and over again by government agencies. There's not a single gun control law that reduces crime or prevents these mass shootings. And of course, DC should have the right to bear arms. It's in the Constitution. It's not being respected in our nation's capital. That absolutely is going to happen. But as I said, I've only been doing this for now a year. I mean, I don't think, I definitely didn't know the difference between a pistol, shotgun, rifle, or handgun a year ago. And many of you probably commented on my stories, some things I had all the language wrong. I mean, it was all completely unfamiliar to me. I've now shot pretty much everything I think I can shoot, and I will continue to. But, you know, I couldn't have foreseen that it would become this national, the federal government, and it would become the, you know, biggest push of the Obama administration. I had a feeling in the second term he was going to go after guns because he had been so anti-gun, and this is Obama, so anti-gun in Illinois. We all thought so. I think the anti-gun people were waiting for the correct tragedy to use that to push through these things. And so what happened in Newtown, which is, you know, everyone in this room agrees, one of the most horrific things any of us have ever experienced, is being manipulated by the White House to push through an agenda they've had banked for a long time. I mean, Senator Dianne Feinstein's had this assault weapons ban bill written before the election. Senator Lautenberg had his high capacity magazine bill written a long time ago. All of them have been ready to just use the right opportunity. And the thing that's different around this time around, two things. One is they've got Mike Bloomberg's money behind it. He just spent $2 million and bought a house in Chicago. He is going to put whatever money he needs to behind this effort, and it changes the dynamic. The Brady organization, they're not powerful anymore. This is everything that goes on in the Capitol now, behind the scenes, is Bloomberg's people. And with money, it makes a big difference. And the other big dynamic change this year is these liberal governors are pushing through stuff that even if the Republican House can hold back, and the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Goodlatte said this week, we are not doing, quote, universal background checks in the House. That's not happening. Though, you know, the Senate, there are Republicans, like, you know, there are several Republican members who are working with Democrats on some sort of negotiated bill. I think there are some changes that could happen to NICS that I think we would all agree on. Like, let's get all those mental health records put on the NICS system. Let's get all those criminal records on the NICS system, you know. Let's make sure these NICS checks work and go through in the right time. But this, you know, universal, you know, I live in DC, I can't do anything with my gun, but one of you want to give your gun trade with a friend should not be subject to a federal gun background check, which leads to federal registry, and we know that now, and that's what their objective is. But these states are doing it, and you saw, I mean, Cuomo didn't breathe on January 1st before he shoved that bill through, and now they have a 7-round limit, and now they have a total ban on assault weapons. Maryland, they're shoving these things through. It's the Senate bill that just passed is even worse than it was originally seen in committee. We're seeing, I mean, it's happening all over the country. Colorado, it's just, you know, and that's where the fight is. I think, you know, the Senate Republican House is going to be able to prevent a lot of the stuff going through on the national level, most of it. But there are going to be these changes in the states, and states, you know, they'll all be more like DC. So it's really moving in the wrong direction. And that's, where you all come in and where the activists come in, and, it's going to be a tough fight, and I cannot think anyone could ever name any period in time in our history where the Second Amendment has been under assault like it is right now in every state, at local, state levels, and federal levels. And it just takes vigilance. Keep a close eye on these politicians and what they're doing. Read the bills carefully. They change them very quickly in the middle of the night. And on that note, I thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I've obviously been contacting my representatives and senators on the state and federal level, and been getting responses back from them that are less than encouraging. I want to know, is there anything more I can be doing?
You've been contacting your congressmen and senators?
Yeah. Any suggestions on what I can do to make a bigger difference?
It's a shame that you're not getting such very encouraging. I mean, I think what I understand, public pressure really affects politicians. And I'll tell you just what case I've been working on lately. Some of you may know about this. Sergeant Nathan Haddad in New York. Nate was, he's a 12-year veteran of the Army. He medical discharge in 2010. He was injured. He served in Iraq. He was found with possessing 5 AR-15 style 30-round magazines. He was selling them. And he didn't have the rifle with him. It was just the magazines. And he was arrested and charged with 5 felonies. And is facing that right now. It's an active case. And you compare that to David Gregory, not charged at all, the exact same magazine. And I'll tell you, I started writing about it, which brought it to a more national level because it's this local issue, in state. And when I hear from Mr. Haddad's defense attorneys, is that when they went to conference, the prosecutor said, we're getting all these calls, we're getting all this hate, we're getting all this rejection. They're politicians, and he's like, there's just such a public pressure. And that's where incidences like that I see where you may not think what you're doing is, but they react to public pressure like nothing else. And suddenly, in conference last week, they offered him 4 misdemeanors. Mm-hmm. But he works as a civilian at Fort Drum now. He doesn't want to take it. He doesn't want to lose his security clearance. So he'll either take it to court. They suddenly called him back, and I wrote another story last week on this, and they called him back into conference today. So we'll see what they've offered. I'm hoping they drop all the charges. But I do believe, and you may get the generic emails back and letters back, but politicians, I think there's a few in the room, and I don't mean to be offensive. They run for office. They care. It does speak to them.
Emily, do you have an address that we could write
That's
to?
the other thing.
I'm sorry.
Become a delegate. That's very potent activist.
Yeah, that's in the wrong party.
Questions?
Do you have an address we could write, or numbers that we could call up there so we could needle them too?
Well, are you talking about Sergeant Haddad? Sergeant Haddad, or just? Well, obviously, I always do that for Congress. 224-3121. Just memorize it. 202-224-3121. It's the switchboard. You just call them. You can get to anyone's office. And even if you don't know your congressman's office, you'll be like, I'm in. Figure it out for me. So I never even have to. You never have to know their exact numbers. I would, at this point right now, if you really want to be active this week, Senate Judiciary Committee, a week from today, will be voting on the assault weapons ban from Feinstein and 3 other bills. One of them is by Schumer and hasn't even been written yet, but it's on the schedule. One of them is called straw purchasers, which is by Leahy. So there's 4 Democratic bills being voted on. Most likely they're going to go party line next week, but if you want to start calling Democrats on the Judiciary Committee and say you can oppose those bills, that's the next thing coming down the pike in Congress. Yep. Mm-hmm.
What is the status of the gun ban treaty with the United Nations now that we have a new Secretary of State?
I think unfortunately it's President asking me about the treaty at the UN that Barack Obama really wants us to enter into, which is definitely a risk to our Second Amendment rights because it doesn't recognize the right to keep and bear arms internationally. It's moving forward. It's going to pass, and the question is whether the Senate ratifies it. Changing from Hillary to Kerry didn't make a difference. Rice is still the ambassador, and it's Obama's pleasure. I mean, that's something to write the White House about. I don't know if there's one of those White House petitions on that. There should be, and maybe that's something to start, because I don't see any reason the United States should be entering into a treaty that doesn't recognize the right to keep and bear arms.
Recognize our Constitution.
Recognize our entire Constitution.
Right.
Right. I particularly don't think we should be involved in the UN at all. But
Right.
Do you know, and can you explain what happened today on the Violence Against Women Act and what Eric Cantor's role in shoving that through? Because I heard it expanded the definition of assault to include harsh language and federalized the whole thing.
yeah, I'm sorry. I really have not been following it close enough to answer smartly on it.
I gotta ask, how did shooting with Kwame Brown go, and did you make any headway with him?
That's such a good question. Kwame Brown was the city councilman, and you know, DC is so corrupt, so I go through these politicians like water. He was the city councilman when I started my series, and I asked him, I said, I'm starting this series. He came to an editorial board meeting at our paper, which is pretty impressive, actually. I said, I'm doing this series on getting a gun, and this is really how the conversation went. He said, a what? And I said, a gun. And he goes, a what? And I went, a gun. He goes, oh. I was like, sir, it's my finger. So I said, and he finally, he kept pushing him. I said, how do you feel? Why is it so hard to get a gun? This is before I'd gone through the 17 steps. I said, why is it so hard to get a gun? Why is the city banning gun rights? And he said, in the end, after being pushed for a while, said, I don't believe in the Second Amendment. It was quite a statement. And what you're asking, which is great, I thought, I was walking after the city council caught wind of the series, and they started moving bills, and they knew that they had to work with me. And I was walking through City Hall one day, and Chairman Brown yelled out, he's like, Emily, why don't we go shooting? And I mean, this is exactly how Chairman of City Council. I was like, who doesn't believe in the Second Amendment? So I thought it was for attention. I was like, seriously? He's yeah. So I didn't take him seriously. I don't know what I thought. His office called a couple weeks later, and they're like, Chairman wants to know when you're taking him shooting. So I said, well, I'll set it up. So I took him to sharpshooters, and he had so much fun. I mean, he had a blast. I taught him even though I'm a new shooter, I know the rules, and I taught him the rules in the store, and I made him go through it several times, and he was very conscientious, and we used a .22. And he was like so into it. He kept making me put the paper back further, and then he wanted to use my gun, and then he wanted to use a .45. I mean, he was like, this is so much fun. I'm coming back, and it really was so fun. It was just amazing that what you can take if they just have a little bit of education, a little bit of experience. They realize it's not irresponsible, and it is fun.
How many cameras were with you?
None.
None?
He did this, and that's the other thing is I was like, I'm gonna show up, it's gonna be a whole thing. It's gonna have every, and I said, can I write? I wasn't even sure if we're doing it privately or, as a reporter, and I said, can I write about it? And he said, sure. I took a picture with my iPhone. We didn't tell him what it was. We said, we should put this on the end of it. We thought this was pretty funny because we didn't know what it was. It was a silencer. So unfortunately, I think he's going to jail, but if not, we always thought like we have something on him. Sir?
I know you cover DC more than anything else, but do you have any reading on Eric Cantor's attitude with regard to the legislation on that?
Just in general, on the leader?
If he's going to cave or how?
Oh, on the sequester?
No.
Oh, no. I really, first of all, Congressman Goodlatte, who's chairman of the Judiciary this year, I talk to his office all the time. He is strong on guns. He is great. Nothing's getting to the floor unless it goes through him. And he said yesterday, his office told me yesterday, he will look at anything that comes out of the Senate. But the real Cantor, I actually said today to someone who works in Boehner's office, I said, Obama keeps going around the country going, I demand a vote, demand a vote. That's this whole politics on guns. And I keep thinking, why not just put it on the floor of the House? It'll go down, and all these Democrats will have to take this vote on voting to ban guns and ban this, and then face electors in 2014, was my thinking. But they said, why do that? The people who are really in trouble politically is the senators who are up for election in 2014. And those Democrats in rural states, they're the ones who are in a mess. And Harry Reid is going to be in such a pickle on what to do about this, because Senator Leahy, as I said, he's rushing this through the Judiciary Committee in the Senate level. Feinstein, I swear that woman will go to her grave before she doesn't get a vote on assault weapons ban. And this is terrible for the 2014 Democrats. I mean, so I think the best thing politically is they drag this out and they have this vote next year, say February of 2014, put these bills on the floor, and then let the House, neglect them. But let the Senate go first, make it their problem.
Right. Yeah, actually, are you any idea, are they less fearful about guns at all in the city council? Any chance you might get some movement if you take them out shooting more?
I've tried. I've invited several. Marion Barry, I think, wants to actually shoot me. So I'm a little worried.
He's a felon.
No, he's a felon.
Yeah, he is. And he is. Oh, he's the worst of all, honestly. So I've invited Chairman Mendelson, who's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He's the one who passed through all these laws for me. And he's actually, I will say, he's such a liberal Democrat. Okay. But the thing is, he's very responsive. If I call, he calls back. If I ask, he passed these bills. He didn't need to. The reason DC, the pressure that I have, the leverage, is that they want two things. They want statehood, which is ridiculous. They should never get it. Right. And they want budget authority, because right now they don't. Everything has to go through Congress. But they're never going to get those things through the Republican House as long as they are having all these anti-Second Amendment laws. So that's the negotiating point, and that's the leverage with them. That's when, when the senators get angry, that freaks them out, because they get that's much further again from getting control of their budget. Sir?
You mentioned that you had given him some safety instructions when you were down there at the shooting range, and here we have Senator Feinstein, who supposedly has a concealed carry permit, photographed with her hand on the trigger, finger on the trigger, pointing the gun at audience.
But we also have a vice president who suggests that you just walk out into the dark. Oh yeah. Right now you shoot him through the just shoot through the door.
You don't even identify your target. Just shoot him.
I actually, I really there are some. I think I have been, as a female gun owner, I'm a big proponent of women getting firearms to protect themselves. I see obviously some women in the room. I wish there'd be more, and I'm always helping women get guns, because when you have irresponsible people. So as a woman, what Joe Biden said, what I tell my wife to do, and he's the Vice President of the United States saying this is what women should do: walk out of when under attack. When someone's trying to get you and rape and murder you, walk outside. You only have 2 shots. Shoot them into the dark, and then stand there. And we laugh, but it really pisses me off, because there are people who think their vice president is smart, and we know God. I don't, and I just, God forbid, I hope that no woman follows that advice, walks out of her house, and takes her only 2 shots into the dark, and then is left completely disarmed. He's so irresponsible. And there's so many. He is such an idiot. And then shooting through the door, sir.
Actually, 2 questions. One is, what's the deal with little Mikey Bloomberg? Okay, what is his issue, and why does he want to impose himself on everyone's life but his own? And what's the deal with Kathy Lanier? I work in security. I have a lot of friends who are cops. How did she ever get where she is?
If I could list the people I can't stand most in the world, I think those 2 would be at the top of my list. Kathy Lanier is a political appointee, and Kathy Lanier is all about Kathy Lanier. And I'll say, she attacks me so often personally. I get emails from her at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, calling me a tabloid journalist, saying I don't deserve to be a reporter. She'll go on the radio all the time. Emily Miller doesn't deserve to be a reporter. She doesn't get the facts straight, because I'm reporting that violent crime is up, because I'm reporting that there's more gun crimes. And at 10 o'clock at night, she's sending me emails from her personal email instead of out doing something that might actually make the city safer. And all it is just attacking me emails. It's not correcting things. So. Look, I don't know why she has that job. The rank and file can't stand her. Chris Bowman is the head of the union, the police union. I mean, they fight her all the time. The police, the rank and file police, FOIA stuff, and the political appointees at this top won't respond to it at all. That's why my FOIA requests aren't getting answered either. As far as Bloomberg goes, he's arrogant and he thinks he knows best for everyone, and government should tell us what to do and how to live our lives. He probably does have a Napoleon complex. He's extremely wealthy. He thinks very highly of himself, and he believes a mentality that I think shared with Barack Obama, that we are not responsible enough to know what to eat, what to drink, how to arm ourselves, and so they need to tell us because we're all really stupid, and we don't know these things, and that's the mentality. It's this, anyway, hopefully he's going to be out of office, but he has this new PAC set up. I was on Fox Business last night. New York, Lou Dobbs, he's great. He's a big gun owner, big gun rights guy. And on the show with me was this guy, Doug Schoen, who's this big Democrat pollster. And he walked in and he said, he operates for Bloomberg's PAC. And am I on video? I'll just say, they bought a $2 million election, and they're not going to stop there, and they're going to be buying other elections, and and I think it's so offensive that this mayor in New York City is telling Chicago what to do, and they're listening, and who knows where they're going next with this. So that's what we got. Now, I'm actually going to be, the real problem with this video is Kathy Lanier is going to come bail me out when I get pulled over and thrown in jail for 2 weeks.
Can you post those emails that Kathy Lanier sent you?
I just chose not to because I'm not going to stoop to her level. If she wants to call me names, she does it on WTOP all the time. She loves to call me names and call me stupid and and I shouldn't be a journalist. And so my revenge is to keep writing about her and her department and the things that they're not doing.
So
watch your back, kiddo.
I have to, at least I got the union police are behind me.
So one of your funniest stories that you've told me before is taking your gun home. Like when you took.
Oh, that's right. So I like to do whatever I can do to drive people in DC totally crazy. Like whatever I can do to scare them and piss them off, I do. So when I was going to finally, after 4 months, take my gun home, I read very carefully the transport laws. And it doesn't say you have to use a car. All it says is if you just have to be unloaded and locked in a lockbox. So the police station is just has no convenient parking. It just doesn't happen to have convenient parking, which is true, and there's no street parking. It's very hard to find. So I took the metro. So when they finally said, Emily Miller, here's your big sheet of paper and you can take your gun. I mean, I couldn't believe I got to take my gun home finally. I said, great, I'm going on the metro. And the police were like, you can't go on the metro. I go, yes, I can. So I loved that. So I had my big SIG box, and I just walked straight to Metro. A friend of mine took a picture of me. So I was like, this is going to drive them totally crazy. But sure, the criminals were on with loaded guns on the Metro.
Yeah. Emily, can we get you a clear box?
It's a good idea.
Emily, I have a question. Now, during this whole debacle that's been going down the past couple months, we've been hearing about these new legislative bills that are going to be coming through. The position that the NRA has seems to have eroded, at least from a political standpoint, as well as what the press seems to interpret them as. Do you feel that the NRA has been handling this as appropriately as possible, number one? And number two, do you believe that they still have the clout to try and reverse this?
I do. They are so, the ILA part of the NRA is they're so good at what they do. I mean, they know the ins and outs of the Hill so well. And, I think it's so false, this narrative in the media that, the NRA is just lobbyists and they're just, buying what they want, and they control these people, and they've bought them off. I just think it's so offensive. There's 3.4 now, I guess, million people in the NRA. Their membership is the pressure, what the NRA power from the ILA, their legislative arm, their power comes from the fact that they've got 4 million Americans behind them who are gun owners who want these things. Mayor Bloomberg doesn't have that. He has billions of dollars, but he doesn't have that power of voters. And they really know what they're doing. They are very good, and they're strategic. And I think they're doing a very good job. And I do think they have. Clout comes from the people, but what they have is just the understanding of how the legislative process works. I mean, they know how the bills that need to get passed that we don't even think of. We need to clear up the transport laws. We need to do these things. Congressman, I spoke about last week, Stutzman, reintroduced the Concealed Carry Reciprocity National Act, which, this, as we all know, passed the House in 2011. Harry Reid refused to bring it up in the Senate, and I think most people just assumed after Newtown that nobody would be brave enough to bring that back. And it's a really important law. I mean, we really need reciprocity. It's way too confusing right now, the way the system is, and way too many people spend time in jail over it, and money on legal fees. So, and I'll wrap this up now, final question. So they are helping Mr. Sussman to get this bill started, start getting supporters. So things like that we, they're always thinking, around the corner, and I think they're doing a good job. Last question.
Emily, just wondered if you'd want any help trying to get some of those council members, because I was an ANC commissioner in DC for 4 terms. I'm personal friends with a lot of them, and I think you really ought to go after the women, because one day when I was at a hearing and I pulled the ripcord on my unloaded concealed carry, empty fanny pack with the holster, Yvette Alexander stood up and started to run out of the room. So if you want some help working with them, seriously, I'll go after some of them, and I'm a trainer too, so happily help you. But I think you really ought to hit the women up. I think they're going to be hard for you to crack than the guys.
Thank you.
And I was wondering what your responses from them have been like compared to the guys on the council.
The thing is Chairman Mendelson he just leads the whole charge. He writes the bills and he tells them all to follow along. They just do what he says. And so the 2 bills that I've put, that he's written in response to my series have all been unanimous. I mean, even Marion Barry, who hates me. They all are liberal, anti-gun, but they listen to him because they know in the end this is going to affect them getting their budget rights or getting their statehood. So that's why they just follow his lead. So he's not even really negotiating
with them. Marion, never catch him at a public meeting. Talk to him out of it, because he really is a pussycat when you get him privately.
Oh no, that's when he hates me most.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. They're not like Republicans. Any?
Newtown's been mentioned a few times tonight, and there's a lot of really peculiar things over there that don't add up. Have you ever thought about going up there and doing a little interviewing? You'd be the perfect person to get a better story on what really went down.
There is I have to admit, it bothers me. I get a lot of comments on my stories or on Facebook about the shooter in Newtown didn't use an AR, or he just used the shotgun, and it's not true. I mean, the police have put out the police report. They're not lying. He used an AR rifle. The shotgun was in his car. He had 2 pistols. One of them he used to kill himself. I think it's the same one I have, actually, a SIG. I just think, I believe, everyone can do differently, and my personal belief in why I don't follow up on those things, because I believe the police are telling the truth. It's a horrendous crime. 20 families lost their children in the most horrific way. The politicians are using it to benefit themselves and for their agenda, but I don't think we as gun owners and gun rights people should be in any way attacking the validity of the story. This is a sick, killer, evil human being who did this horrible thing. He happened to use a gun, which happened to have a brand, Bushmaster, which sounds scary. That's all it is, and most people in the public think that Bushmaster means it functions differently. People think that it's automatic. It's just it's the way the media is handling it. But I wish we would just leave the people of Newtown alone. But anyway.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
time is short, so I'm going to call the meeting here. We'll do one again next month. We'll be caught up on some other things. But for those, I know that there are some gun show coordinators. We've got some stuff up here. Some of you asked for some materials and stuff, and that's up here, so come see Bruce. We've got, if you need the carry cards, if you got friends or you're taking care of a gun store, to make sure they have our free carry cards. We got stacks of them up here, so be sure and pick them up if you need them, and membership applications. I would like to, again, thank everybody for coming out. We have a face I haven't seen here in a while, Paul Moe. Raise your hand, Paul. Paul's the founder of this organization, not me.
Hey, Phil, what's the chances we could get a congressman from Virginia, maybe start a campaign to see if we could get a bill introduced to get DC residents to be able to buy guns in Virginia and Maryland?
Well, you know, they did try to put a bill in that would have allowed, I'm trying to remember how that went.
I think we should, I mean, we have the bottom line, politicians do things because they get pressure.
Yeah.
And perhaps that would be a good project for VCDL to put pressure on Virginia.
They got to have somewhere to buy them. They should certainly be able to come here.
And I'm a former DC resident too, so.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the people I know guns in DC would never register. And I would.
Okay, well, it's something we should certainly look at. I know that somebody talked about that, but didn't get far.
And that's the thing that drives the fear of God into them. They hate it's all about power. They have this delusion that they're a state, and any attempt, but the fact is the District of Columbia was created because it's the seat of government, and every citizen has to go there to see their representatives. So that is why it's supposed to have no government, because for this very reason, that there won't be harassment of people exercising their rights.
Right. Makes perfect sense. And I think Emily kind of highlighted something I said all along, which is some of the worst tyranny you'll ever see is at the local government level. Right. Over and over, I've seen that. So, and they're just a prime example of just how bad that tyranny can be. Just one real fast one.
Are you open to having a meeting of this magnitude or greater outside of Warner's Virginia office if he votes the wrong way?
Well, we could certainly have a protest there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sure. We can, depending on the day of the week and the time, we can turn out a lot of people. All right, well, again, I want to thank everybody. I appreciate the big turnout. I wanted to...
Hey, Bill, two things real quickly. Where are we meeting for bike?
Okay, we're going to go, those that wish to, we're going down, when you leave the police station, make a left, and it's called the Jukebox Diner.
And the other thing is they asked if we would move the chairs.